Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 41, An Obsessed Gaze. A couple of days had gone by. You're planning to head to the 18th floor already? Well, good luck, Loki said as she ate her breakfast. During that time, Judas continued to explore the dungeon. He didn't delve too deep, only down to the 16th floor. Other than gathering money to pay off his $500,000 Valis debt, he also spent much of his time repairing his mana core. The progress is slow, but progress is still progress. His magic circuits and mana core were still badly damaged from his battle with the Juggernaut. He anticipated that he wouldn't be able to use his original strength for quite a while, relying solely on his Felna to fight. I was too reckless. I need to fix this habit sooner or later. Judas rose from his seat. Loki, I need a status update, he said, turning to her just as she finished her meal and reached for a wine bottle. What? But I just updated your status yesterday, Loki replied with a frown. The Goliath spawn time is right around the corner. There's a good chance I'll encounter it, Judas explained. Pfft, ha 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 ha. Loki burst out laughing, wiping away imaginary tears. If any other level 2 said that, I think they were either suicidal or stupid, she said, standing up without letting go of the bottle. But since it's you, I almost feel sorry for that big guy. Still, since this could be your first battle against a monster Rex, I guess it wouldn't hurt to give you a little boost. She picked up a knife. Thank you, Judas said, stripping off his shirt. There was no tattoo on his back, since his status was locked to prevent outsiders from seeing his Felna. Loki grinned, nicked her finger with the knife, and painted her blood across his back. One warning, other parties might have already taken down the Goliath. Don't be too disappointed if you reach the 17th floor and it doesn't spawn, she said as the Felna reappeared, glowing across his back. I understand. A holographic display projected from his back, numbers rising as Loki watched. She shook her head, pulled out parchment, and recorded the update. Here you go, kid. Your status update, she said, handing it over. Judas received the parchment. No doubt about it, your growth has slowed down, Loki added, crossing her arms. I don't know exactly how the Venerated one works, she thought. But what happened back then must have been a special case. The kid hasn't faced real danger since. The upper and middle floors don't challenge him enough, it makes sense his growth stopped being so rapid. Judas read the parchment carefully. Judas Spade. LV2. STR, I-22, I-29. End, I-23, 127. Dex, I-25, I-32. AGI, I-20 125. Mag, 162 175. Mage I. Skills, The Blessing of the World Tree. Elemental Master. Eternal Persistence. The Venerated One. Penitent Executioner. Magic, Otherworld Thaumaturgy 5th tier. Body Reinforcement. Barely any growth, as expected. He hadn't gained a new skill or magic when he leveled up, but he did acquire a development ability. Upon ranking up, adventurers had a chance, though not always guaranteed, to obtain one. Judas had plenty of options to choose from. Mage, Luck, Abnormal Resistance, Hunter, Fist Strike, Treatment, and Healing Power. Fist Strike was unimpressive, making it an easy pass. Abnormal Resistance wasn't necessary, Judas already had Blessing of the World Tree, and multiple spells that served the same purpose. The same applied to Treatment and Healing Power, they were useful, but redundant. That left only luck and Hunter. Luck, as Hestia once said, was like divine protection. It didn't just boost fortune, it was like an invisible shield guarding against unseen dangers. But Judas judged that, the Venerated one, was already a superior version of it. Hunter, however, was different. It could only be obtained at level 2 and required killing many monsters in a short period of time, making it very difficult to obtain. It boosted power against monsters the adventurer had fought before. A strong contender indeed. Even so, Judas ultimately chose Mage. For now, that was what benefited him most. The Mage ability enhanced magic power, expanded range, and improved mind efficiency. Most importantly, it granted a magic stat comparable to an adventurer one level higher. I could have picked Hunter now and Mage later. Judas considered the possibility. But my instincts tell me I'd regret it if I didn't take Mage right away. There was no point second-guessing. In the dungeon, monsters weren't the only threat. Weakness was a sin, and without Mage, Judas would be completely powerless against first-class adventurers in his current weakened state. Loki, noticing he was lost in thought, suddenly waved a hand in front of him. "Hey, are you dissatisfied with your status update?" Judas stayed silent, so she pressed. "Don't overthink it. That kind of growth is perfectly normal for most adventurers." "I'm not dissatisfied at all, Goddess Loki," Judas replied calmly. He hadn't been pushing himself hard in the dungeon. By ordinary standards, his growth was actually above average, if only slightly. Interestingly, because he was working to repair his mana core, his foulness somehow registered the effort, causing his magic stat to rise faster than his other parameters. He folded the parchment neatly and handed it back. "Well, I'm off to the dungeon." He put his shirt back on, donned the armor gifted by the Astrea Familia, and made for the door. "Tell that hot advisor of yours I said hi," Loki teased with a lewd grin as she waved. Judas rolled his eyes and stepped outside, blending into the bustling streets of Warario. This time, he didn't draw quite as much attention, people were starting to get used to his presence. With so many famous figures in the city, running into someone well-known wasn't rare. Still, a few passers-by stopped to gawk. "Is that him?" "That's Judas Spade, the new record holder. The rising star of the Loki Familia." Judas paid them no mind. What caught his attention was the piercing gaze he felt from the Tower of Babel, specifically, from its top floor. Freya. Chapter 42, Prelude. Ever since waking up from his 3-day sleep, he had occasionally felt this same piercing gaze directed at him. It was intense, filled with desire, longing, and an almost possessive hunger. "What are you scheming this time, Freya?" Judas thought with a frown. The Freya Familia, rivals of the Loki Familia, were a significant force that could not be ignored. Especially that crazy goddess Freya and her equally crazy followers. Even Judas could not predict what they would do. "I completely forgot she had the ability to see a person's soul." Honestly, he had several spells that could conceal or even disguise his soul. She must have already seen mine. But it was too late for that now. I didn't want to get involved in whatever crazy shenanigans she's up to, but since I've already got her attention. He turned around and shifted his gaze upward, locking onto the top of the tower. "Bring it on." Judas was not one to shy away from a challenge. He stared back at Freya provocatively. The gaze on him vanished the moment he turned, but Judas continued to fix his eyes on the top of the tower for some time. "I know you're there." He didn't use a spell to enhance his vision. Because he was already sure she was still sitting on her throne. "There's no need to be afraid. I am now a member of the Loki Familia. If they make a move, it could spark a massive conflict between the two factions. Even Freya wouldn't want that." Even as a level 2, many already viewed him as a combat force on par with a first-class adventurer. His status in the Loki Familia wasn't exactly low. Even though I haven't met the executives or the rest of the Familia yet. Finn and the others were currently challenging the depths of the dungeon. Their goal was to reach the 59th floor. He could only imagine the battles they were facing. He continued forward, feeling like he had just won the staring contest with the goddess of love. Unfortunately for Judas, even he underestimated Freya's obsession with him. At the top floor of the Babel Tower, Freya sat on her throne with Otter by her side. A perpetual blush lingered on her face as she swished the glass of wine in her hand. "Ah!" she moaned with her eyes closed. He looked at me. Her breathing grew shallow and ragged. Resist. I must resist looking at him, or else he will only become more alert. She bit her lip as she fought the urge to gaze out the window. His senses are sharp, to even feel my gaze from this far away. I knew it. It is destiny. He must be my Otter. No, he has to be. Her body trembled with excitement. It took her some time to calm down. Too bad, the location of the hostess of fertility does not align with the path he takes to the guild and the dungeon. The Twilight Manor was located at the northernmost side of Orario, while the tavern sat in the west. Unless Judas intentionally headed there, he would almost never cross paths with the hostess of fertility. It's such a shame I can't see him every day as seer, but that's fine. She tapped the side of her throne with her finger. Because soon, you will be mine. The sound of metallic footsteps entered her ears. She turned and smiled at the sight of her familia's executives, geared up as though they were about to conquer the deep floors. My goddess, forgive me for my insolence, but I have a question I would like to ask. A blonde elf with glasses said with his head bowed. Ask away, Hayden. Freya's voice carried alluring composure. Is it really necessary to send this much force for the plan? It seems a little excessive. Hayden Sellant, known by the alias Hildersleaf, was a level 6 adventurer of the Freya Familia. The moment those words left his mouth, several other executives looked at him with offense. You stupid elf! How dare you doubt the goddess plan? The four Palams shouted in unison. But Hayden ignored them, keeping his head bowed before the goddess. You can never be too careful, Freya said as she sipped her wine, offering no further explanation. I understand. Hayden closed his eyes and bowed even lower. With that, every first-class adventurer of the Freya Familia, with the exception of Otter, moved out. Judas Spade, no, my Otter. Freya gazed into her divine mirror, watching Judas walk through the streets of the city. Soon, we will unite. Otter stood silently at her side, saying nothing the entire time. In the central square, all geared up and ready to go, Judas jogged toward the dungeon entrance. Miss Bell, you're late again. At the corner of his vision, he spotted Belle and Lily together, the latter looking annoyed, the former bowing apologetically. It seems like they've already formed a party together, Judas commented as he passed through the entrance. Should I also find a supporter? Seeing them together, he began to harbor such thoughts before shaking his head. I don't think I can find a supporter that can keep up with me. The majority of supporters were only low-level adventurers. It was rare to find a level 2 or higher willing to stay in such a looked-down-upon role. Of course, that was only the case for supporters who offered their services publicly. Even level 4s could be forced into the role of supporter when paired with adventurers of level 5 or higher. But such cases were rare, mostly confined to high-ranking familias. Judas stopped thinking about it and blitzed forward, cutting down every monster he encountered in the upper floors instantly. Telekinesis. He waved his hand. Magic stones and item drops littering the ground flew into his bag. If only I had the 6th tier spell storage, things would be a lot more convenient. Seeing the bag grow in size, Judas clicked his tongue before accelerating forward. In just 15 minutes, he had already reached the 11th floor. Is that the Apollo Familia? Judas squinted, spotting a large group battling infant dragons. The emblem of the Apollo Familia was visible on their flag, which was why he could recognize them. How unlucky. From his advisor Rose, Judas had learned plenty about the dungeon. It is a rare monster and considered the boss of the upper floors where a monster Rex doesn't appear. The guild has estimated it to be level 2. Rose had spoken like a professional, ensuring Judas paid attention. They should be capable of handling it themselves. I think they were tasked to deal with the Goliath. I should hurry and reach the 17th before they do. Judas merely glanced their way and left. Cassandra Ailion, busy healing her comrades, felt a disturbance and turned in the direction Judas had gone. The one who brought ruin to fate was nearby. She muttered absent-mindedly. "Idiot! What are you doing? Focus on the battle." Daphne Laros barked, her voice sharp with authority. Sorry." Cassandra yelped before resuming her healing magic. The 13th to 24th floors of the dungeon were called the middle floors. Here, monsters were much stronger than those in the upper floors. Even for a level 2 adventurer, these floors were perilous. Going solo was usually suicide. Unfortunately for the monsters, Judas was no ordinary level 2. Any of his spells could obliterate them into dust. Right ahead should be the 17th floor. He charged forward without hesitation. On the 17th floor, a huge wall stood in the great chamber known as the Big Wall of Grief, where the monster Rex Goliath spawned. It should spawn any second now. Judas closed his eyes and waited. His ears twitched. The entire floor trembled as massive cracks spidered across the giant walls. A piercing scream echoed through the chamber. Here it comes. Chapter 43, The Venerated One vs. The Goliath. A devastating roar echoed against the dungeon walls. Judas looked up at the colossal monster standing at 7 meters tall. The Goliath. The monster Rex of the 17th floor. Through his legs, he could feel the small vibrations in the ground with every step the Goliath took. That is one big boy. He remembered the conversation he had with his advisor yesterday. You want to know when the Goliath might spawn? Rose questioned as she stared at the adventurer she was in charge of. She quickly opened her drawer and flipped through some documents. Here, the last time the Goliath was slain was 13 days ago by the Loki Familia. She said before opening a book that contained information about the dungeon and its monsters. After a few pages, she stopped and pointed to an image of a giant monster with gray skin. What differentiates a monster Rex from other monsters is that, aside from the fact that they are much stronger than regular monsters, they also have a trait that is unique to them. They only spawn after a certain period of time. In the case of the Goliath, it always respawns 2 weeks after it is killed. Which means you're in luck, the Goliath is scheduled to spawn tomorrow. Rose said before closing the book. But be careful, even though the Goliath is the weakest among the monster Rexes in the dungeon. Its estimated strength is level 4. Judas opened his eyes. The Goliath had finally finished spawning, turned its head, and their gazes met. Facing a monster that was 2 entire levels higher than him, Judas did not flinch at all. Make this entertaining for me, sparring partner. Magic power flared up inside his body, and his entire figure was surrounded by a vibrant glow. Body reinforcement. A magic that strengthened his physique in exchange for mind. After spending more than half of my mind reserves, I had already achieved level 3 tier physical prowess. Judas felt his body surging with power. Which meant if he pushed just a little bit more, becoming a high-grade level 3 in terms of physical abilities alone was very possible with just this one magic. It was basically no different from a level boost. But that was not all. Physical boost. Sturdy body. Strengthening magic. Invigorate. Kinetic amplification. Fortify. Judas was now covered in several layers of light. If I go any further, my body might be torn apart. Using so many strength-enhancing spells on himself, his body was starting to strain. But at the same time, I am being healed by Blessing of the World Tree. Roar! The Goliath charged at him, each step leaving an imprint on the ground. Judas also got ready, set himself in a crouched stance. Like a runner's starting position and launched himself forward. In his wake, he left spiderweb-like cracks where he had just stood. His figure blurred, and the monster stretched out its arm to deliver a punch.
All right then.
With a small smile, Judas clenched his fist, intending to fight the colossal beast head-on. There was no strategy, no plan, no tricks, just pure straight-up hands. A contest of pure strength. Just the way he liked it. He was like an ant compared to the Goliath in size, but the moment their fists collided, a terrifying shockwave reverberated everywhere. The 17th floor shook violently, and Judas was sent flying into the opposite wall, leaving behind a crater where he landed. Cough. Cough. He spat out blood and felt several of his bones break. That hurt like hell. He extricated himself with difficulty and jumped down. When he looked ahead, he grinned when he saw the Goliath had also been flung away despite its giant size and was currently lying flat on its back. In terms of pure power, it's a draw, huh? Judas said as he cracked his neck and dusted himself off. He saw the Goliath trying to get back on its feet. Its gaze landed on him, and it roared in anger. Looks like somebody is pissed. Judas then stared at his right hand, clenched his fist slowly, and then opened it again. I am using up too much mind just to maintain my strengthening spells. The price of unleashing the spell was one thing, the price of keeping it active was another entirely. As a result, he could feel his mind reserves dwindling at a rapid pace. Looks like my current self can only maintain this state for a few minutes at best. That was the conclusion of his self-evaluation. While he was in the middle of his thoughts, the Goliath had already made its way toward him. A giant shadow loomed over his figure as the Goliath raised its leg and stomped where he stood. A huge amount of dust scattered, and when the Goliath raised its foot expecting a flattened corpse, the monster frowned when it found that nobody was there. I am right here, you dumbass. The Goliath widened its eyes after hearing a mocking voice. It turned its giant head around and looked at its right shoulder. There, Judas stood, staring the Goliath directly in the eyes. Hey! He waved his arm like he had just met a longtime friend and then delivered a punch straight at the Goliath's face. The Goliath wailed as it fell on its back once again. A loud crash resounded as its giant body collided with the ground. Before the colossal monster could sit back up, Judas landed on its chest like a meteorite. The Goliath roared in pain and raised its head to stare at the human, who was several times smaller than itself. Why are you so surprised? Judas looked at the Goliath like it was an idiot. We may be equal in terms of raw power, but I can outmaneuver you pretty easily. In the end, your size became your disadvantage, making your big body an easier target. Judas continued as he raised his hand, flew into the air, and a giant magic circle manifested on the 17th floor ceiling. A massive amount of mind was being gathered, and the Goliath's instincts sensed the danger. The monster roared and tried to stand back up, attempting to run away to escape from the spell's range. Too late. Judas said with a neutral face. Lightning storm. The entire cavern was illuminated by a white light. A sea of lightning rained down, striking everything in his vision. The Goliath was not spared. Lightning strike after lightning strike, the monster was unable to resist as its body was disintegrated with each hit. When the magic circle disappeared and everything finally calmed down, small sparks of electricity still lingered on the ground. At least level 5. Judas said as he assessed the power of his own spell. With my mage development ability that increases pretty much every aspect of my magic. Combined with Elemental Master, which greatly boosts elemental attacks by 200%, even a level 6 would have to be careful if they were to face that attack just now. Other than the status points, the game-like bonus effects from skills and magic show the true strength of the fauna. Something that even the power system from Estalon's world doesn't have. Judas added as he turned his head and saw the Goliath some distance away from him. Only its head and half of its torso remained, with its magic stone sticking out. Looks like you just barely managed to get out of the spell's attack range. He walked up to the Goliath, which turned its head after hearing his voice. The monster growled, but Judas was not threatened. He pointed his finger at the Goliath's head. A magic circle materialized at the tip of his index finger. Annihilate.
A purple shockwave burst outward, destroying the remains of the Goliath into ash. "It's over," Judas said as he drank a potion, unaware of the danger that was approaching him. Chapter 44, Ambush. Judas stared at the remains of the Goliath slowly turning to ash. At the corner of his vision, he spotted something on the ground. Oh! A drop item? He walked towards it and picked it up. A Goliath's tooth. After looking at it for a bit, he stuffed the tooth inside his bag. Now then. With his hands on his hips, he turned to walk forward. Shall we see what the 18th floor looks like? As he walked down the stairs that led to the floor below, a huge group of people, numbering in the hundreds, had stepped into the 17th floor. What happened here? A man with brown hair said with a frown. It was the Apollo Familia, who were currently on an expedition. The one who spoke was their captain, Hyacinthos Cleo, a level 3 adventurer. Amazing, I can feel a vast amount of magic power lingering in the air, Cassandra said as she held her staff timidly. No doubt about it, there was some sort of big battle that happened before we arrived. Daphne spoke as her eyes darted side to side, analyzing the environment. Looking at the scale, it seems like it was either a really powerful level 4 or even a first-class adventurer, probably a mage, that took down the Goliath. She continued as her eyes spotted small sparks of electricity still lingering on the ground. TCH, some bastard got here before us, Hyacinthos said with a scowl. Captain, what do we do? A member of the Apollo Familia questioned. We will proceed with the expedition. Our goal wasn't to take down the Goliath but to at least reach the 20th floor. Hearing their leader's words, the other members offered no objection and continued their march. But just before they could take the first step, several shadows flashed above their heads and landed in front of them. Hyacinthos noticed this and raised his hand to signal the people behind him to stop. Captain? What's wrong? Daphne asked with a puzzled face. Unfortunately, Hyacinthos didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on the masked figures in front of them. They covered themselves in cloaks, making it difficult to distinguish their features. They're fast. I didn't notice they were coming until they appeared in front of me. They radiated a terrifying aura. One glance was all it took for anyone to realize that these mysterious figures were not to be messed with. A bead of sweat fell from his face. First-class adventurers. Even though he was a homo that spent too much time in Apollo's bedroom. As an experienced level 3 adventurer, he could tell the difference in strength between himself and those monsters. Daphne and the others finally noticed them and raised their weapons instinctively. But the masked figures did not care about them and treated the Apollo Familia like air. One of them crouched down, outstretched his hand, and felt the ground with his palm. This magic, high-grade level 5 firepower, maybe even reaching the territory of a level 6. He stood up and clapped his hands to shake the dirt away. A level 2 being capable of such a thing. No wonder he got the attention of our goddess. He continued as he turned to the rest of his comrades. The goddess will be pleased to hear such news. Another masked person spoke as he tapped his spear. Although he was also wearing a disguise, the unmistakable features of his ears and tail made it easy to deduce that he was a beastkin. What an awe-inspiring harbinger of destruction, yet this tempest of crackling divinity. It stirs memories of my brother-in-arms, the Thunderborn sovereign, Hadine. Another one spoke, but with such overly dramatic gestures that it was almost impossible to take him seriously. You stupid elf, speak words that we can understand. 4 voices said simultaneously. The ones who just spoke were 4 short individuals wielding different weapons. It was unbelievable how synchronized they were. Enough, you fools. The target is moving, let's not waste any more time. In front of the Apollo Familia's eyes, the figures of the masked men flickered. Their speed was too fast for their vision to keep up. See, Captain, are those guys who I think they are? Daphne said with a nervous face. Be quiet, as long as it has nothing to do with us, it's none of our business. Hyacinthos replied while wiping the sweat off his forehead. They said target, right?
He turned to his familia members and ordered them to continue the expedition. I feel sorry for the poor soul they've set their sights on.
So this is the 18th floor, huh?
Judas muttered as he walked on a field of grass.
This isn't anything like the floors above. The 18th floor was a safety point where no monsters were born, though some monsters could come up from the floors below.
The floor was filled with crystals and nature. Large forests and lakes covered the floor.
Especially the ceiling, it almost feels like I've returned to the surface.
He looked up, and the exceptionally high ceiling of the 18th floor was filled with brilliant shining crystals. The amount of light from the crystals depended on the time and cycle through the day. If it was night, the crystals would turn blue, and if it was day, the crystals would turn white, resembling the color of the sky.
That must be Rivera over there. He looked into the distance and spotted a settlement located on a cliff. A town that gets destroyed and rebuilt over and over again.
Let's go over there, shall we? He took a few steps before pausing.
I am being followed.
His eyes narrowed. I've felt it vaguely ever since the fight with the Goliath. They must have been using a magic item or spell to avoid my senses until now. He could feel their presence, even though they had been maintaining a constant distance of a few hundred meters. He took a slow breath and closed his eyes.
Detect presence. Sense life.
Search. His senses expanded and propagated like a sonar. It didn't matter if they were using artifacts or a magic spell that hid their presence.
Their locations were immediately revealed one by one.
They all have such strong life energy. Are they all first-class adventurers? It was then he realized the danger he was in.
4, 5, 6, no. 7. I am surrounded. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead.
He also has detection spells?
Looks like we were found out. An unknown voice entered his ears.
Judas didn't turn his head to look and immediately ran. That was until his instincts screamed at him. A sense of dark foreboding crashed over him like a tidal wave.
Danger! Shit!
Judas could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears as his body moved on instinct. He narrowly dodged as a spear stabbed into the ground with immense force, right where he had been standing just moments ago. His gaze snapped toward the source. Who are you guys? He growled, now face to face with a group clad in dark clothing, their faces concealed behind masks. They didn't utter a single word.
No warnings. No threats. They simply attacked. Without hesitation.
Chapter 45, The Venerated One vs. Freya's Executives Part 1. Judas barely had time to think before another attack came flying at him. A dagger, thrown with deadly precision. He twisted his body mid-step, the blade grazing past his cheek, leaving a thin, stinging cut. Tisk, fast. Realizing the severity of the situation, Judas boosted himself and cast his strengthening spells all at once, matching the status of a level 4 in terms of physicality. Covered in several layers of light, his speed multiplied several times, leaving behind a trail of dust clouds in his wake as he ran.
I've got to leave this dungeon and head to the surface. Hiding in Rivera isn't an option, and heading deeper into the dungeon is too dangerous.
He could see the stairway that led all the way up to the 17th floor.
You think you can get away?
Before he could reach it, the cat person was already behind him, his spear shimmering with a faint glow.
This is bad.
Judas bent his knees and dropped low, barely dodging a stab aimed at his shoulder.
He planted his hands on the ground and kicked backward,
his heel smashing into the cat person's ribs, sending him skidding back a few meters. Yet, the moment Judas stood upright, two Palams rushed in from the sides and swung their weapons toward him in perfect synchronization.
They're very coordinated. Judas didn't hesitate and cast a spell. Permeation.
His figure became transparent, turning into mist.
The attacks passed through empty air, leaving the Palams confused. Stealth. Erase presence.
In front of their eyes, his figure completely vanished.
A stealth spell? the cat person said with a frown. Where did he go? One of the Palams questioned as he swung his hammer around, hoping to land a lucky hit. Hiding behind a nearby tree, Judas glanced over before turning his head toward the stairway and making a run for it. Salas Hilder! A voice resounded. The sound of electricity crackled in the air. Judas looked up and saw hundreds of lightning arrows raining down. There was no clear target, but it was clearly a massive bombardment blindly aimed at the 17th floor's entrance. Unfortunately, Judas happened to be in the center of it. But he knew this was not the result of bad luck. They predicted where I would go. I got completely read like a book. Knowing that any normal barrier couldn't save him from this bombardment, he cast an element-based protection spell instead. Wind Shield. A giant dome made of wind surrounded him. In an instant, dozens of lightning arrows crashed into his barrier, but thankfully, it was able to withstand them. Unfortunately, even though he managed to block the attack, the electric shock generated still damaged him. It still got me. Judas grimaced as he felt his movements turn sluggish, small bands of electricity dancing around his body. The dome of wind dispersed, and the mage who had launched the lightning attack appeared in front of him. Stealth magic, detection magic, attack magic, defense magic, and even enhancement magic that boosts your stats to match a level 4. All without a chant and cast in an instant. The man looked him up and down, staring at him like a teacher assessing his student. Indeed, an adventurer with an arsenal as deep as yours would be a terrifying foe to face on the battlefield and a great asset as an ally. As a mage, you are already complete. However, I can see from this short exchange that in some areas, you are still severely lacking. If you wish to become worthy of my goddess, then you have much work to do. The man lectured him before raising his staff. Now, go to sleep. The staff swung toward Judas' head, intending to knock him out. But Judas was a beat faster. Solar flare. A blinding light erupted without warning. It felt as if the sun itself had appeared right in front of them, burning their eyes. Ugh! Even with a mask, it did not help. The attackers had no choice but to cover their eyes. Using the opportunity, Judas did not hesitate to run. After successfully stepping onto the 17th floor, he immediately made his way toward the stairway leading to the floor above. He had already memorized the pathway and took the shortest route he knew. What was that? His figure was like a flashing shadow. On the way, he passed other parties of adventurers, even members of the Apollo Familia. But Judas didn't stop to look at them for even a second. After finding the stairway to the 16th floor, he continued upward. 15th floor, 14th floor, 13th, 12th, 11th. It took him less than a minute to return to the 10th floor. Roar! The dungeon walls cracked, and monsters spawned to block his path. But Judas didn't slow down one bit, charging through the wall of monsters like a battering ram. With the strength of a level 4, the monsters felt as though they had been hit by a speeding truck, blown to pieces as chunks of flesh splattered in every direction. Now covered in blood, Judas didn't have the luxury to stop and clean himself. He could feel several presences closing in behind him. They already caught up? These guys are relentless. Just as he was about to step onto the stairway to the 9th floor, a shadow flashed past him. The cat person stood in his way, arms crossed. This is as far as you go, you piece of shit. Seeing this, Judas was about to cast a spell, when danger flared from his side. The one who has tainted my lady, feel my wrath. He turned his head and saw another masked elf wielding a black longsword. Judas moved his body, trying to evade the slash aimed at his torso. With his sharp eyesight, he was confident he dodged it in time. But the masked elf smirked. Judas' eyes widened as the blade extended invisibly, a massive diagonal gash ripping across him. It tore through his armor, clothes, and flesh in one devastating strike. Blood splattered everywhere. Arg! Judas fell to one knee, clutching the wound with his hand, his palm slick with his own blood. A cursed weapon? Reforming a few meters away, Judas barely had a moment to breathe before the masked elf began chanting under his breath. Magic! His instincts screamed danger. He dashed forward before the spell could activate, his fist rearing back. But just as he was about to land the hit, a massive force slammed into his side. He stared at the spear-wielding cat person, whose legs were outstretched. Judas felt the impact ripple through his bones as he was sent crashing into a wall. Dust and debris exploded from the collision. Crap, that really hurt. He barely had time to recover before the rest of the group arrived, closing in on him again. Their movements were efficient, too efficient for mere thugs. Judas exhaled sharply, wiping the blood trickling from his mouth. "All right," he muttered, straightening his stance. His eyes glowed faintly. "You want a fight? Fine." Chapter 46, The Venerated One vs. Freya's Executives Part 2. His aura flared, and the ground beneath his feet cracked. "From what I can tell, there are 4 level 5s and 3 level 6s. 5 of them are close combat types and the other 2 are magic swordsmen. Facing such a huge disadvantage in both strength and numbers, the best way to respond." A magic circle shone beneath him. "He is casting a spell. Stop him." The masked figures immediately rushed toward him. But his casting speed was much faster. Earth Dome. Chunks of earth moved and formed a barrier around Judas. Their weapons clashed with the shield of earth and could only leave small dents behind. Is to call for reinforcements. A certain image of a dark elf flashed in his mind. "Mika, lend me your power." Viridia Exciter. The ground trembled. A small army of wooden golems emerged from the floor. "What the? New monsters?" the cat person asked with a puzzled expression. "No, these are his summons," the elf with the lightning magic said. He immediately figured it out with just a glance. The wooden soldiers charged at them. For a lower-level adventurer, encountering these summons would be terrifying. However, for people like them, who had already risen to first-class adventurer and above, they're weak, the cat person said with disdain. In his eyes, the summons movements were slow and clanky. He moved his body to the side, easily dodging the attacks of a wooden golem. With one swing of his spear, the wooden golem shattered into thousands of pieces. "Ha! They're only as strong as a high-grade level 3. What was he hoping to achieve with this?" One of the Palams sneered as he swung his axe, killing a wooden golem without breaking a sweat. "That's right. Viridia Exciter is a magic that can summon soldiers that can only be as strong as the base stats of their summoner. With my status as a level 2, even with Elemental Master giving them a massive boost to a first-class adventurer, they are still pretty weak." Judas was not disheartened. Instead, he felt a little relieved after seeing them let their guards down. He raised his hand, and multiple magic circles appeared in front of him. The lightning mage noticed the movement of magic power coming from Judas. His instincts warned him of imminent danger, and then he realized something. No way. He turned toward his comrades and opened his mouth. "Be car." But his warning was a beat too slow. "Detonate." Red magic circles appeared over the wooden golems' heads. The attackers noticed this, but it was too late. Boom! 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 Dozens of explosions occurred one after another. The attackers bore the complete brunt of the detonation. The 10th floor of the dungeon shook violently as the area was engulfed in bright light. "What is going on?" the nearby adventurer parties cried in alarm. Even the adventurers from the floor below and above felt the tremors. "Arg! You bastard!" the cat person shouted in anger, his arms crossed as his body was bombarded by searing heat. Ignoring the pain, he gripped his spear tightly and launched himself toward Judas. "We won't let ourselves be defeated by a rookie, it would only bring disgrace to our goddess. My brothers! Charge!" Even the Palams and the elf who wielded the cursed weapon, amid the continuous explosions, ignored the state of their own bodies and charged together. Pieces of armor flew and small chunks fell off, but they did not care. "These guys are insane.
They're actually tanking those explosions like it's nothing," Judas said, who was covered in a protective layer of light.
He widened his eyes after witnessing the scene.
As expected of first-class adventurers.
Stealth. His figure vanished. "He is getting away,"
one of the Palams said through gritted teeth.
"Damn it."
The cat person thrust his spear and only managed to hit Judas' afterimage.
"Coward. All you do is run away."
The spear wielder felt his anger boil.
"Who said I was running?"
They heard a voice behind them. The moment they turned their heads, they saw Judas standing across from them, pointing with his index finger as a magic circle manifested at his fingertip.
Firestorm. The magic circle shone brightly, and a wave of fire erupted. "Shit!"
A wall of searing flame surged forward, rolling across the ground like a living tide. The heat scorched the air, forcing the very earth to melt into molten liquid and blacken beneath its fury.
The attackers screamed as the blazing wave swallowed everything in its path.
When everything finally calmed down and the smoke cleared, Judas, who had protected himself earlier, witnessed the aftermath firsthand. Dozens of massive, overlapping craters were left behind. The ground was scorched and cracked. The walls looked like they had been carved out by an excavator. The lingering heat from his magic prickled his skin. He extricated himself from the rubble that had buried him. His eyes caught sight of his attackers, who had faced explosions and a tsunami of fire at point-blank range. Except for the Palams kneeling on the floor and coughing up blood, their skin and clothing scorched. The rest were still standing but barely. They used their weapons as crutches to remain upright.
"I knew that wasn't enough to finish them off."
Judas clicked his tongue and raised his head to look into the distance.
One managed to get away. The lightning elf had escaped on time and remained unharmed.
"I applaud you, Judas Spade, surrounded and outnumbered, yet able to reduce us to this state. You are the first to do so in a long time," the lightning elf said as he took a few steps forward.
"But if you think that is enough to defeat us, then you are mistaken."
He shifted his gaze toward his comrades with a stern look.
"Get up, you fools, do you only amount to this much?" Hearing the provocation, the rest of the attackers grit their teeth and glared at the elf. "Don't get conceited, you stupid elf. Who the hell do you think you are?"
They rose, cracked their necks, and rolled their shoulders.
"That was a good warm-up,"
the dark elf said as he took off the armor he had been wearing, which had been melted by Judas' flames. Seeing this, the lightning elf shifted his gaze back to Judas, who had a bead of sweat running down the side of his head.
"We tested enough of your abilities, Judas Spade. From here on, we are no longer holding back."
Before Judas could react, a fist struck his stomach, blowing the air from his lungs.
Get ready to experience hell. Chapter 47, The Venerated One vs. Freya's Executives Part 3. I could barely see that attack coming. Judas knelt on one knee, clutching his stomach. Tisk, looks like they are no longer pulling their punches, huh?
He looked at his current state and realized his mind pool had less than half remaining.
My strengthening magic. I only have a minute left.
His face twitched from pain as he stood and got into a stance.
Looks like you still have some fighting spirit left in you. But how long will that last?
The lightning elf commented after seeing the defiant look in his eyes.
Be careful.
His ability to instantly cast destructive spells is what makes him dangerous, but in close combat, he is only as strong as a level 4. He added, before 4 figures flashed past him in synchronized motion. Against a combat mage like him, a single breath of freedom is enough for him to gather his magic power. Don't give him that chance.
Infernal barrage.
A cascade of fireballs hurled toward them.
But the 4 identical figures seemed undeterred and pulled small swords from their pockets. Magic swords?
Judas realized what those items were as the Palams activated them without hesitation. A stream of magic attacks collided with the fireballs, producing a shockwave that sent debris flying and a cloud of smoke into the air. From the shroud of dust, the 4 figures emerged and instantly appeared in front of him.
Crap!
The 4 Palams, after drinking healing potions, were back in prime fighting condition.
a spear, an axe, a greatsword, and finally, a giant hammer. Each wielded a unique weapon, and their mastery was nothing to scoff at. But the most terrifying aspect of their combat prowess was not their level or skill but their ability to work together seamlessly, as if they were one entity. The moment they took action, Judas found himself at a severe disadvantage. Erg! Judas gritted his teeth, sweat and blood pouring from his brow. They exchanged dozens of moves per second. Their figures blurred, their movements too fast for any normal person to follow. Still, it was glaringly obvious that Judas had been backed into a corner and could not fight back. A stab to his shoulder. A slash across his chest. A wound on his arm. A gash on his thigh. The more seconds passed, the more injuries Judas accumulated.
Meanwhile, the four Palams remained unharmed, pressing the offense and leaving him no room to breathe or cast spells.
If I lose concentration for even a millisecond, I'm dead. Judas felt his body ache all over.
Blood splattered everywhere, staining the dungeon floor and the walls.
Think, how do I get out of this?
His mind raced, but he was at his wit's end. He didn't even have time to cycle spells and could only move his body, doing his best to avoid being cut down. As he swerved to the side to avoid a spear aimed at his chest, a figure flashed beside him.
The dark elf with the cursed weapon. Who swung downward. I can't dodge that. Realizing this, Judas blocked by crossing his arms, using Jarnglofer to defend. The obsidian gauntlet glowed as he channeled magic power into it to reinforce and increase its defensive capability.
Because it was made of orichalcum, Jarnglofer conducted magical energy better than most materials. Combined with his near-perfect control of magic power, it was why he didn't bother using a staff or wand like other mages.
However, even so, the strike of a level 6 was not to be underestimated.
When the cursed sword struck his gauntlet, although it offset some impact, it was not enough. The bones of his left forearm split with a snapping sound.
Ah! Screaming in agony, Judas's left arm dangled as his feet skidded across the ground.
Before he could get his bearings, a hammer struck his left side and sent him flying into the dungeon wall.
Crash!
He felt several ribs crack under the intense force.
This is the end of the line for you, Judas Spade.
The hammer-wielding Palam said, hoisting his giant hammer over his shoulder as he turned toward Judas, whose body was planted against the wall. Judas said nothing as he pulled himself free. Chunks of dungeon rock fell as smoke rose from his body.
He clutched his left arm and tried to realign the bones as his body healed.
The attackers frowned when they saw his wounds closing at a visible rate. There was no magic spell being cast and I sensed no magic power being used.
It must be an unknown healing skill. The lightning elf muttered, rubbing his chin. Ha, that only means we can rough him up as much as we want, right? Instead of surprise, this information excited the attackers. These sadistic bastards. Judas cursed in his mind, blood covering half his face. But before he could even stand, the Palams charged forward. Give me a break. Perhaps his prayer was heard. Fissures appeared on the dungeon walls and floor. Growls and roars filled the air. Monsters spawned around them in droves. I completely forgot we were in the dungeon. Judas looked around. Orcs and flying bats surrounded them, eyes full of hostility. But Judas knew he couldn't rely on these monsters to take out first-class adventurers. That would be ridiculous. These monsters. Annoying. The cat person shouted as he swung his spear, one-tapping any monster he saw. His attackers quickly dispatched the low-level monsters with little effort. However, the monster's appearance bought Judas the opportunity he needed. With that thought, Judas activated a massive spell that would nearly deplete his mind reserves. A cyan-colored giant magic circle formed beneath him. Stop him. The lightning elf began chanting and the Palams rushed, ignoring the monsters in their way. But Judas merely smiled. Blizzard. With a swipe of his hand, the magic circle flared, and the temperature plunged. A violent gale howled into existence, carrying shards of ice that sliced through the air like razors. A blizzard roared to life,
a swirling maelstrom of white that froze anything it touched. A large section of the 10th floor turned into a frozen wasteland, with the caster standing at its heart like a sovereign of winter. He stared at the lightning elf, who was encased in ice. "You said I was going to experience hell?" Judas lifted his head, eyes burning with cold defiance as the air around him chilled. Their gazes locked, and though his mind began to grow hazy, he forced it back with sheer will. A frost-laced breath escaped his lips as a faint mist curled around him. "Then I'll freeze hell itself, and bury you in it." Chapter 48, The Venerated One vs. Freya's Executives Part 4. Judas staggered, trying to remain upright as he took ragged breaths, drops of sweat accumulating on his forehead. "I'm at the brink of a mine down." The glow that surrounded him flickered, dimmed, and finally vanished. His body felt heavier as his strengthening magic had now worn off, returning him to his original status as a level 2. He opened his pouch and noticed that the potion bottles inside had shattered, their contents spilled. Just my luck. He grabbed a potion bottle that only had half of it remaining and saw there was still some liquid left inside. Better than nothing. He drank without hesitation, making sure that his lips didn't get cut from the broken glass as he replenished his mind reserves, even just a little. Sinkhole. With difficulty, he raised his arm, manipulated the earth, and created a hole big enough to fit a person on the ceiling. With this, instead of searching for the stairway just across between dungeon floors, creating a direct hole between the floor layers was a great shortcut to take. Just as he was about to head out, he caught sight of movement at the edge of his vision. 3 of his attackers, the Palams excluded, were breaking free from their ice blocks. Bastard! The cat person was the first to break out, and his enraged shout echoed throughout the area. Not even bothering to pick up his spear, he rushed towards Judas like a madman. Fly! Judas flew into the air and went towards the hole. "Oh no you don't." The cat person's speed was nothing to scoff at as he leapt, leaving behind cracks on the ground, and was able to grab Judas' leg mid-air. "Get down here, you son of a bitch," the cat person said as his grip tightened and instantly crushed Judas' ankle. Arg! Judas had to stifle his agonized scream. He bit down on his lips so hard that they bled. He looked down, pointed his arm downward, and summoned a magic circle. Air burst. With a sharp crack, the air imploded, sending a shockwave of compressed wind roaring forward. The attack directly hit the enemy in the face, even causing his nose to break, but his grip never loosened. "You are not gonna get rid of me that easily," the cat person said with a wild grin, blood pouring out of his nose. Judas did not say anything and just cast another spell. Permeation. His figure turned to mist, and the cat person found himself holding nothing but empty air. Fuck, this guy has so many annoying magic spells. Judas did not look back and opened another hole, passing through to the 8th floor. Get back here. The veins on the cat person's legs pulsated as he launched himself upwards. Seeing the enemy hot on his tail and gradually closing the distance, Judas turned around. With blood dripping down his lips, Judas raised his hand and summoned multiple magic circles, each with varying colors. Witnessing this scene, the cat person's pupils shrank into a dot. "Eat this," Judas said with bloodshot eyes. Magic power surged. Air burst. The air around him warped, compressing before detonating outward in a concussive shockwave. Infernal barrage. Flames spiraled into being, splitting into dozens of molten projectiles that streaked across like comets. Ice arrows. Jagged shards of frozen death crystallized midair, making a hissing sound as they cut through the wind. Lightning spear. A blinding lance of crackling electricity tore through the air with enough force to shatter armor. Earth spikes. Jagged spikes of stone rotated and charged with a boom. Water cannon. Finally, torrents of compressed water burst forth like a broken dam, with enough power to pierce through metal. All these spells were being fired at once, and all of that firepower was focused on a single target. This monstrous bastard, the cat person said with bared fangs as a bead of sweat formed on the side of his forehead. With this much magic power, if I take that head on, it won't just leave a few scratches behind. He thought in his mind, but his movements never slowed down one bit. Judas expected the cat person to move out of the way, but he underestimated the grit and tenacity of a first-class adventurer.
Come on. Bring it.
With a crazed look in his eyes, the cat person charged like an angry bull.
Out of the way. The dark elf appeared beside him. You uni bastard, it's about time you showed up. The cat person spat. The dark elf didn't reply, his gaze focused on Judas as he cast his own magic spell. Burn Drain.
A super short chant explosion magic that sent a roar of flames. When the magic attacks collided, pure devastation occurred. The battlefield became a storm of chaos as a large shockwave resounded throughout the upper floors.
What is going on with the dungeon? Are first-class adventurers fighting down here? Someone report this to the guild. Adventurers who usually occupied these floors couldn't help but become anxious. Miss Bell, what's with these tremors?
Belle and Lily, who happened to be on the 5th floor, felt the ground shaking from all the way up here.
I don't know, Lily. I am as clueless as you are.
Belle said with a frown as she stared at the ground below her.
Back to the battlefield.
From the smokescreen, 2 figures emerged, their clothes scorched and their disguises starting to fall apart. TSK, so much for these disguises. The cat person picked up the mask that was half destroyed and crushed it with his hands.
I can't believe he managed to escape.
He looked up, seeing the hole had already been closed down, and his face couldn't help but scowl.
Do not fret, Alan, it's not over yet. The dark elf commented with a calm voice. Ha? What are you talking abo?
Alan was about to ask until his words paused at the end when he realized something.
Hey Dean. It's all up to you, you blasses bastard. He clicked his tongue in annoyance.
On the 3rd floor, an adventurer party could be seen working together. They were rookies, judging by how tense they seemed on this floor.
Everyone.
I sense that there is a group of goblins on the other side of that pathway. Just as the rookie party was about to brandish their weapons.
What's that noise?
The ground shook, and a hole appeared in front of them.
A new monster?
They got into a stance, anticipating danger, but their faces warped into confusion the next second when they saw a bloodied figure crawl out.
Cough. Cough.
Judas Spade coughed up blood and felt pain all over his body. That impact caused a lot more damage than I thought. He said in his mind as smoke came out of him, his clothes torn apart and his armor worn down.
If I didn't have my healing skill, I probably would have been defeated long ago.
He looked up at the group of rookies who stood frozen, clearly still processing the situation.
Close. Judas shook his head before closing up the hole that he left behind. My mind reserves are at an all-time low. I think I should just walk from here on out. He touched his head and felt dizzy. I think I've already lost them.
The thought barely formed when his instincts flared, a sharp warning cutting through him.
Danger.
He froze, ears straining, footsteps echoed behind him.
Slowly, he turned. Fucking hell, give me a break.
From the shadows emerged a familiar figure.
The masked elf, staff in hand, moving with deliberate steps as a hostile aura seeped into the air around them. Chapter 49, The Venerated 1 vs. Freya's Executives Part 5. The masked elf walked with a slow and steady gait. Judas' eyes widened as he sensed a vast amount of mind being gathered. Strike eternally, immortal general of lightning.
His ears twitched, picking up the chant the masked elf was muttering.
Crap.
He reacted instantly, a magic circle appearing under his feet. But the masked assailant was undeterred and had already finished his casting.
Varian Hilder. Blue light illuminated the dungeon pathway.
Varian Hilder, a super short chant lightning element spell that summoned a single massive and devastating bolt of lightning upon its targets. It was powerful enough to destroy an entire great island on the 27th floor and boil the surrounding waters. Judas felt danger screaming through every cell of his body. The moment he saw a massive lightning arrow surging toward him, goosebumps crawled across his skin.
Earth Dome.
Judas hastily cast a protective spell, shielding not only himself but also the rookie adventurers behind him.
It's useless. The masked elf snorted.
The sound of lightning boomed in everyone's eardrums.
What?
Judas exclaimed with wide eyes as the lightning bolt pierced through his defense.
Small rocks and rubble exploded in every direction.
Before he could even react, the lightning had already struck him, launching him backward and sending him skidding across the ground as he screamed in pain.
Ah!
His body twitched and convulsed, sparks of electricity dancing across his figure as he writhed in agony.
I can sense it, you barely have any magic power left. You're probably on the verge of mine down.
That's why your defensive spell shattered so easily. The elf spoke as he walked forward, adjusting the glasses hidden beneath his mask. His gaze shifted toward the group of rookies, who were huddled in the corner, shivering as they lay half-buried beneath the rubble.
Poof!
He pulled out a potion and poured its contents over the adventurers without looking back, before fixing his attention once more on Judas, who appeared to have passed out. But the elf didn't care, and continued speaking.
You're probably wondering why I'm here. The answer's simple. As a commander and a tactician, it's second nature to anticipate an opponent's next move.
In your case, while you were busy struggling with the others, I climbed up here ahead of time, just so I could cut off your escape. A few seconds later, he was already standing next to Judas, who hadn't moved an inch.
Hey, I know you're faking it. Quit your useless struggle and come with us.
There was a tense silence as the elf looked down at him, waiting for a reaction.
If you keep up this act, then don't blame me.
He pulled a dagger from his sleeve. In a blur, his hand snapped forward, the dagger flying like a throwing star and stabbing Judas in the shoulder. The elf raised his brows, expecting Judas to grunt in pain. But there was no reaction.
No twitch. No movement at all. Maybe he really passed out.
Just as his guard lowered, Judas abruptly shot up, driving his knee toward the elf's face.
But the masked elf blocked it with his palm effortlessly. Fool, that was a half-assed surprise attack. I'm disappointed.
Hearing that, Judas smirked faintly and raised his middle finger.
Fuck off.
A glowing magic circle hovered above his palm.
Sinkhole.
The ground collapsed beneath them, forming a massive hole. Below, adventurers on the fourth floor looked up in shock as the ceiling burst open above their heads.
Wrath of the Celestial Titan.
Judas chanted as his arms became wreathed in lightning, the silhouette of a colossal beast manifesting behind him.
Boom!
He swung his fist without hesitation. Seeing this, the elf crossed his arms to defend. The moment the blow connected, a roar of thunder shook the walls, and the elf was hurled downward, the ground shattering under the force of his impact.
Close. Not so fast.
The masked elf sprang back to his feet almost instantly, but before he could leap upward, Judas had already sealed the hole.
That brat!
The bottom half of the elf's mask cracked apart, a thin trail of blood dripping from his lips to his chin.
Judas didn't relax for even a second, he immediately turned and ran toward the surface. Hey buddy, are you alright? That guy looks like he got beaten up.
On his way, he passed groups of adventurers whispering as they noticed his battered state. Judas ignored them and yanked the dagger from his shoulder. His healing ability had noticeably slowed down, but that was not his main concern right now.
Don't pass out, don't pass out, don't pass out.
His vision blurred, his consciousness flickering.
That was dangerous.
He whispered weakly before using the last of his mind to dissolve into mist and escape. It was the first and only time since his reincarnation that he had ever lost and been forced to retreat.
I don't even know where I'm going. His body moved on instinct. He didn't realize he had already reached the surface. He drifted like the wind, staggering blindly through the streets, fighting against the darkness threatening to consume his consciousness. There is no danger here. Far from the dungeon, Judas rematerialized, ensuring no pursuers remained. Seeing no one nearby, he let out a shaky breath.
Then his eyes closed, and he collapsed.
A door creaked open.
A blonde elf in a waitress uniform stepped outside, carrying bags of fruit and vegetables.
Mr. Spade? Ryu's eyes widened in shock.
Judas, her savior, lay unconscious at her feet. She dropped the bags gently and knelt beside him, placing her hand against his forehead.
This is... Mine's zero. She sighed in relief.
His condition wasn't critical, he was alive. But his body was battered with injuries and bruises.
Without hesitation, she began channeling her healing magic. Hey, Ryu. What's taking you so long? We've got customers lined up, and you're out here slacking off. Mamma Mia's familiar voice rang out as she stormed outside, irritation thick in her tone.
But the moment her eyes fell on Judas in Ryu's arms, her words caught in her throat.
Sigh.
You can use the spare room upstairs.
Thank you, Mamma Mia.
Ryu bowed gratefully before carefully lifting Judas and carrying him inside.
Mamma Mia watched her go, silent for a few moments.
Then her eyes drifted toward the highest floor of the Tower of Babel.
What the hell are you planning this time?
She rubbed her temples, already feeling a headache coming on. Whenever that goddess was involved, chaos was sure to follow.
Chapter 50, Rest in the Hostess of Fertility. Celestia. That was the name of the world where Estelon came from.
A typical fantasy world teeming with supernatural creatures, demons, elves, dwarves, spirits, fairies, and more.
In the southern part of the world lay the sacred forest, a fantastical land that appeared in children's fairy tales.
Yet, what most didn't know was that this place was real. This was an era before magic was discovered. Estelon, the Spirit King, patrolled the perimeter when he spotted a young woman lying unconscious at the far edge of the woods.
A human?
Estelon narrowed his crystalline eyes. As he moved closer, he immediately noticed something unusual about her. She's huge, at least 4 meters tall.
A titan?
No, they've been extinct for ages.
She's too small for a full-blooded titan. It must be a descendant of their kind.
With an outstretched hand, he was about to eject her from his domain.
Help, me.
A weak voice escaped her lips.
Estelon hesitated.
His gaze fell upon the deep wounds covering her body. With a sigh, he flicked his wrist. A small whirlwind formed beneath her, gently lifting her off the ground as he led the way forward.
Cameron.
At his call, a fairy knight appeared beside him, her presence barely causing a ripple in the air.
Estelon didn't react, he was used to her silent appearances.
His tone remained steady as he gave his command.
Be on guard.
I sense a group of intruders attempting to breach the barrier.
The bloodlust they're emitting, they've come with hostile intent. Yes, my liege.
Cameron, the fairy knight bowed. Sunlight glinted off her armor before she vanished without a trace. Estelon turned his gaze toward the thick fog that marked the boundary between the forest and the outside world. His golden eyes gleamed as his vision pierced through the mist, scanning beyond the outer regions of the forest.
A deep frown formed on his face.
Without another word, he continued forward, the unconscious woman still floating behind him. On his way back, the forest's residents greeted him warmly, their smiles filling the air with joy. But his gaze remained fixed on the woman. To others, she would seem ordinary.
Just another wanderer.
But in his eyes, a translucent white aura surrounded her, not just around her body, but stretching endlessly into the sky. No, it didn't just envelop her, it covered the entire forest.
No. It is even larger than that.
His sight extended beyond, and he realized the truth. It wasn't just the forest. It wasn't just this land. The fate energy surrounding this woman reached beyond the heavens, beyond the world itself, like an unshakable law written into the very fabric of existence. The weight of destiny bound to her was immeasurable.
A vast amount of fate energy.
No, this is beyond vast. She is not just a chosen one, this woman is a cornerstone of fate itself. At that moment, he had no way of knowing that the woman he saved on a mere whim would one day be known as Akasha Solmir, the future supreme sage and the first mage.
The one who would unravel the secrets of the universe, the founder of magic. Judas' consciousness wavered between darkness and light. His body felt strangely weightless, yet every breath he took sent dull aches through his limbs. Another dream about my past life. Faint voices reached his ears, distant yet familiar. He's stable now, but his mind depletion was severe. He needs rest. That voice. Rio? His eyelids fluttered open, greeted by the dim glow of a lantern swaying from the ceiling. The scent of wood and alcohol lingered in the air. He was in an unfamiliar room, surrounded by familiar people. You're awake. His gaze shifted, meeting Ria's piercing blue eyes as she sat beside him. A small, relieved sigh escaped her lips. How long was I out? His voice came out hoarse. Half a day. You were lucky I found you when I did. Judas let out a weak chuckle. Yeah, lucky. Suddenly, multiple presences filled the room. Is he finally awake? Cyr came rushing inside, her eyes filled with concern. Thank goodness you're all right. She let out a relieved smile, stepping closer and gently placing her hand over his. Looks like you got yourself into trouble once again. Loki spoke while being seated on a chair on the bedside, but her usual carefree grin was nowhere to be found. Instead, her face was stone-cold serious, a dangerous glint in her eyes. Tell me who the fuckers were that attacked you. She demanded. Every detail. We're going to hunt them down. Cyr flinched at Loki's words but quickly masked her reaction. Nya, Loki looks pissed nya. Anya murmured from the doorway. Right? Nya, I can't believe someone tried to take his life, even with his cute little but nya. Chloe huffed, her tail flicking in agitation. Behind them, the rest of the hostess of fertility's waitresses were peeking inside, their expressions a mix of curiosity and worry. Judas ignored their banter and turned his attention to Loki. With a nod, he recounted everything he could remember about his attackers, describing them and his encounter in vivid detail. Freya. That bitch. Loki snarled, her eyes darkening. Does she want a war between our familias? Even though his assailants had worn masks and disguises, Judas had seen through them. Their features, their weapons, their magic, they resembled the Freya Familia executives I'd heard about in rumors. You would be hard-pressed to find another large group of first-class adventurers in the city. Other than Loki and Freya, there's the Ganesha Familia, but I doubt it was them. A familia that had long been dedicated to order and public safety attacking another adventurer for no reason at all seemed ridiculous. And I doubt Evolus could have nurtured that many level 5s and above in such a short time after the Dark Age ended. The great feud 7 years ago, where the forces of Evolus clashed against the adventurers of Orario, had all but crippled their strength. Even if remnants of Evolus still remained, raising a first-class combatant in such a short time through conventional means would be nearly impossible. In Orario, the number of adventurers ran into the tens of thousands, probably even more. But despite that, only about half of them could rank up to level 2. The rest had no choice but to remain at level 1 for the rest of their lives. The number of challenges, difficulties, and life-threatening experiences required just to reach level 5 was something most people could not fathom. It took many years, decades, even, just to get that far. Out of the tens of thousands of adventurers in the city, probably fewer than 40 were first class. It was a prestigious status reserved only for the best of the best. Monsters who had faced numerous challenges for many years and survived, as a result, obtained strength beyond mortal limits. I got attacked pretty much by every executive of the Freya Familia except for Otter. It was a deduction even a simpleton could see through. Freya Familia, you better watch your backs, because this debt, I will pay it back tenfold. A sinister light flashed in his purple eyes. That wraps up this part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.